Mr. Murali Pillai.
Mr. Speaker, sir, before I start my speech, may I, with your indulgence, offer my congratulations to Professor Walter Teixeira for making his maiden speech. And in the same vein, I would like to, and I'm sure the other members of the House would agree, that look forward to the contributions that the other nominated members of Parliament who have just been sworn in that will make through their speeches in this House. Mr. Speaker, sir, I support the aims of the bills that in improving. May I read again? I support the aims in this bill, which is focused on improving the conduct of the parliamentary elections and to deal with contingencies that may arise during an election. The overriding aim is, of course, to uphold the integrity of the process and make sure that the public confidence in the election process is always high. I use this process, the word process in its widest sense, from the processes involving the electoral register to the processes involving nomination, conduct of elections, and of course, election expenses as well. I have 3 points to make. The first one, Your Honor, Mr. Speaker, sir, is in relation to deposits by candidates. I note under the Clause 4E of the bill, it is proposed that the deposit must be made through an electronic transfer, funds transfer system, or bank draft, or certified check. Legal tender is removed. Presumably, it is part of the government's push to make Singapore go cashless. This lies in contrast with Section 10, subsection 3 of the Presidential Elections Act. Members would note that the Presidential Elections Act was just revised last year. I do appreciate the government's push to convert our society to a cashless one. I half suspect the Honourable Minister Ong Ye Kung, who is in charge of this initiative, may even advocate payment using PayNow. But at this point, though, significant parts of our society still use cash. Why is it necessary in these circumstances to remove deposits by legal tender? Would it not be better not to hurry this until our society has really become cash-free, which is not the case now? With reference to the usage of certified checks, how is this mode impacted by the government's intent that our society stop using checks by 2025? Would ELD anticipate making further changes to this payment mode then? I also note that there is no process outlined on how the deposit will be returned. So if you are pushing for a cashless transaction, then perhaps we should provide for end-to-end, such that the deposits may be contemplated to be returned to a specified account provided by the candidates via electronic funds transfer system. Second, on the recounting of votes, I note that Clause 14 of the bill provides that the returning officer must conduct a recount where the difference between candidates with the most number of votes and the next candidate is 2% or less. I support this amendment. In fact, in the last general elections, I had the chance to invoke the previous process as a candidate for Aljunied GRC. Then the candidates had to decide whether a recount was necessary. And Mr. Speaker said it was almost like an episode from The Amazing Race, because we had to make our way from the assembly area and we have to go to the principal counting center. So we had to drive there, and through the process we were not sure whether we would be too late to meet the returning officer. And finally, when we met the returning officer, we asked for a recount. Then he took out a paper and read from the script, agreeing to our request. So there are quite a lot of moving parts to the old process. And this process is much better, because the rationale behind the recounting is solely to ensure the accuracy of the vote count, given the close margins. So it makes sense for the returning officer to be reposed with the power to initiate the process. Final point, Mr. Speaker, says on the parliamentary expenses. Clause 25 proposes a different system where a candidate does not have to provide supporting documents, meaning bills and receipts. Instead, a statement would suffice. May I please ask, what is the shortcoming of the current system that requires the candidates and the election agents to provide supporting bills and receipts to the returning officer? The current system, in my respectful view, has good accountability. There can be public access to the bills and receipts. We can check whether the election expenses regulations have been observed by looking at the source documents and not just the statements. If there's any discrepancy or shortcoming, then there's an ability to deal with it then and there, close to the holding of the elections. Under the proposed system, I fear there could be unintended consequences. For example, loss of documents during the one-year period that the candidate or the election agent is supposed to hold on to these documents. So this perhaps may loosen the form of accountability and may impact on the integrity of, of the process. Save for that, I support the bill.